At Carter and Company, everyone knew one universal truth: if you walked into Emily Carter's office smiling, you sure as hell weren't walking out that way. My boss, Emily, that Emily was known throughout the building as the she-devil in heels. Stern, cold, and stone-faced. Her eyes could freeze lava, and her words could slice steel. This morning, she called me out by name again in front of the entire executive team. Second week in a row. My heart rate skyrocketed as she stared at me, her expression unreadable. She tossed our proposal back like it was radioactive waste and said, "Your team has been rejected 2 weeks in a row, Director Walker. Are you seeking career diversity?" Translation: You're this close to being canned. I took a breath, swallowed the lump in my throat, and said, "I'm sorry. We'll reflect seriously and deliver a stronger plan next week." She didn't say a word after that. Meeting adjourned. Everyone evacuated like the room was on fire. I barely had time to grab my tablet before my phone buzzed. It was a message from Kitty, my online girlfriend. Ugh. How can anyone be so evil? You poor thing. In a civilized society, tyrants like her shouldn't exist. Boo-hoo, hubby, you've been wronged. The sticker pack was an orange cat crying into a pillow. I cracked a smile. Only Kitty could make me laugh after a verbal beatdown like that. I started typing a reply, but then I noticed something weird. Emily hadn't left yet. She sat at the head of the conference table, scrolling through her phone with that usual icy poker face. But something was off. Her lips were slightly curved, and her eyes had this oddly warm shimmer. Like the corner of a glacier catching sunrise. What the hell? I blinked and bolted out of the room. 5 minutes later, Kitty bombarded me with more messages. Hubby, why aren't you answering? Is it that witch again? She made you so upset you forgot me, didn't she? Poor little me is just waiting for your love. I laughed out loud. Honestly, how did I even end up with Kitty? It started 2 years ago when I was tired of dating app catfish. I've got a weakness for nice legs. Call me shallow, but most of the women showing off theirs online turned out to be hustlers, bots, or crypto evangelists. So I flipped the script, posted gym selfies, food pics, and the occasional quote from obscure philosophy books. Surprisingly, I attracted a different crowd. Kitty was the one who stood out from the noise. She commented thoughtfully, no thirst, no weird energy. One night I'd met her about Camus and Nietzsche, and somehow that led to her sending leg pics. Our relationship evolved from, "I only show you ankles," to, "Hubby, look at these thighs." Over time, her cold online demeanor melted into clingy sweetness. She became the one I vented to when work killed my soul. And tonight? Tonight we were supposed to finally meet. She had a business trip to Chicago. So did I. Coincidence? Fate? Chaos theory? I wasn't sure. We'd planned for months, but I always bailed. I worried that seeing her face would shatter the perfect image I had. Not because I thought she was ugly, but because it might make everything too real. I loved the fantasy, the anonymity. Kitty understood kind of. But this time, she pressed harder than usual. Honey, this might be the only chance. Can we at least try? My phone buzzed non-stop that night. She sent like 20 leg pics in 5 minutes. You better not ghost me again, mister. I replied, no ghosting. I want more pics tonight. You're gonna wreck me. She sent a flirty voice message calling me, hubby, in that breathy, sweet tone that made me short-circuit every time. I barely survived the call. Afterward, I collapsed into bed, only to get hit with a last-minute notification, another business trip, Chicago, early morning flight. Again. This is the 3rd damn time this month, I grumbled. In my sleep-deprived frustration, I accidentally sent that complaint to the entire company Slack group instead of just my coworker. 1 second later, Emily Carter herself responded in the thread. If you have objections, Director Walker, you're welcome to share them with me in person. Also, the board is considering moving a branch to Chicago, so your wish may come true. Instant social death. Colleagues DM'd me condolences, RIP bro. She's coming too. Be warned. I was about to dig my own grave. I ranted to Kitty, and she replied, wait Chicago? OMG, I'm flying there too. Hubby. Let's meet for real this time. I hesitated. But when I didn't reply after 2 minutes, she backtracked. Oh no, sorry, you must be super tired. We don't have to meet. Maybe next time. That guilt hit me harder than Emily's death glare. I gave in. Okay, I typed. She was immediately typing for like 10 straight seconds. Then, you mean it? Like, actually? Hubby, I'm so happy right now you don't even know. Her joy radiated off the screen like sunshine. It almost made me forget that in just a few hours, I'd be stuck in a plane with my she-devil boss. And as fate would have it, guess who got the seat next to me on that very flight? Yep. Emily. MS. Stone cold herself. She looked flawless in dress, perfect makeup, but the light shadows under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept. Probably a workaholic all-nighter. I swallowed my fear and greeted her with a polite, morning, MS. Carter. She gave me a curt nod and didn't mention the Slack incident. Thank God. I sat beside her like I was defusing a bomb. Director Walker, she said suddenly, thank you for making time for this trip. I forced a smile. No trouble at all. I'm honored to help drive company growth. She didn't even look at me. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. God, she was immune to flattery. Still, I couldn't shake the weird feeling gnawing at me. Why did Kitty's voice remind me so much of Emily's? Nah, impossible. That'd be way too weird, right? But what if? My phone buzzed again. Kitty, hubby, I'm boarding now. Can't wait to see you. Her excitement practically burst through the screen. I smiled to myself, unaware that the biggest shock of my life was waiting on the other side of that landing. The moment we landed in Chicago, I was ready to shake off the awkward tension from that entire flight sitting next to Emily Carter, who managed to not speak a single word to me for 3 straight hours, which honestly was more terrifying than if she'd actually started yelling. I thought I was in the clear, ready to grab my keycard, crash at the hotel, and mentally prepare for meeting Kitty tomorrow. That plan evaporated the second the receptionist squinted at her screen and said, I'm so sorry, sir, it seems there was an error with your booking. Due to a system failure, your identity verification didn't process correctly, and while the only available room left tonight is the presidential suite already assigned to MS. Carter. My soul left my body. I could feel Emily's icy gaze on the back of my neck like a sniper scope. I turned around slowly, half expecting her to demand I sleep in the supply closet or book a motel 630 miles away. Instead, she just looked vaguely irritated, like someone had accidentally double-booked her hair appointment. Fine, she said to the receptionist. He can stay for one night. There are 3 separate bedrooms. Just make sure our appointments tomorrow aren't delayed. I didn't even get a chance to thank her before she turned on her heels and walked away like she owned the entire damn floor, which she probably did. As I trailed behind her into the suite, the only thing echoing in my brain was, this is so not good. The room was massive, high ceilings, glass windows, furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary. As she disappeared into one of the bedrooms without a word, I finally had a moment to check my phone. Kitty had sent 6 messages in a row. Hubby, I made it. Just checked into my hotel. I miss you already and I haven't even seen you yet, the flight made me dizzy. Or maybe I'm just lovesick. Hubby, where are you staying? Maybe we're close. Wait, you said you're on a business trip with your boss, right? You're not sharing a room with her, right? Right? I stared at the screen, then glanced around the ridiculously luxurious suite I now shared with the Ice Queen herself and sighed. This was going to be hard to explain. I messaged Kitty back, long story. Hotel messed up. Separate rooms, I swear. Her reply came almost instantly. You sure she didn't plan that mess up? That devil woman better not be trying anything shady with my hubby, I chuckled despite myself. Only Kitty could turn a stressful night into comedy gold. But when she video called me a few minutes later, things got weird. She was wearing a navy blue lace nightgown, hair damp from a shower, soft lighting glowing behind her like some romantic K-drama. She started ranting again, seriously, what's with this she-devil? Always messing with my husband. Ugh, then she froze. Her eyes locked onto something in my background, probably the expensive wall art or the ridiculously ornate lamp, and her voice dropped. Wait babe, what hotel are you at again? I paused, my heart doing this weird little hiccup. Presidential suite. Carter and Company. Booked it. Why? She was quiet for a second too long, then forced a laugh. Oh, must just look familiar. I think I've seen pictures online or something. Yeah. Pictures online. Totally normal thing to say. She didn't push the topic further, which only made it worse. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. Hubby, earlier you said you're not sharing the same suite with your boss, but if there are 3 bedrooms, isn't it still kinda the same? I explained the whole booking failure, how there were no other rooms available, how I was absolutely not thrilled to be here. I even added a bit of sass. She looked like she'd stepped in dog crap when they told her I was sharing the suite. Trust me, no one's happy about this. Kitty went silent. For a while. That alone was odd, she usually couldn't stay quiet longer than a TikTok soundbite. Then she mumbled, sorry babe, I just remembered I have something urgent. Talk to you later, okay, and hung up before I could ask anything. The rest of the night was a black hole of anxiety. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, overthinking everything. Was I too blunt? Did she get scared to meet in person? Was I losing my mind thinking Emily and Kitty had similarities? Nah. That'd be ridiculous. They were nothing alike. Emily was a frigid, terrifying, workaholic boss with 0 social skills. Kitty was a flirty, clingy sweetheart who once sent me a picture of her lunch shaped like a cat's face. Total opposites. Right? At around midnight, I got up to grab some water from the suite's kitchen. I didn't bother turning on the lights until I stepped into the living room and stopped dead in my tracks. Emily was sitting on the sofa in the dark, wearing a familiar-looking navy blue lace nightgown, staring at her phone like she was about to launch a missile strike. The glow from the screen lit up her face just enough for me to see the deep crease between her brows. And for the first time ever, she looked lost. Not cold. Not sharp. Just tired. Human. She glanced up and our eyes met. Her stare locked onto the band-aid on my finger, and for a split second, something flickered across her face: shock, confusion, guilt. I had no idea. I stammered, "Oh, I thought you'd gone to bed. Sorry to bother you." She didn't respond. Just watched me like she wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how. I got my water and escaped back to my room like my life depended on it. 2 hours later, Kitty finally texted. Hubby, I mean if you ever found out your sweet online girlfriend was kinda similar to your cold, heartless boss, what would you do? I replied instantly, probably pack my stuff and disappear into the mountains. She didn't respond right away. Eventually, she sent, just kidding. I'm nothing like her, I swear. But I knew something was off. Her tone, her timing, her weird reaction to the room in the video, it all lined up too well. But I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. Because if Emily Carter was Kitty, then I'd been sending heart emojis and thigh pics requests to the scariest woman in my life for 2 years. That night, sleep never came. And the next morning, when I walked out into the suite's common area, dressed and ready for our meeting, there she was, Emily Carter, already dressed to kill, sitting with perfect posture and a fancy breakfast tray in front of her. And not just any breakfast. Mango sticky rice. Pickled cabbage fish. My favorites. I blinked. MS. Carter. She looked up, totally calm. You're awake. Eat before we go. Breakfast is important. I stared. This wasn't hotel breakfast. This was hand-picked, possibly handmade. How did you? She raised an eyebrow. You talk in your sleep. I felt cold sweat running down my back. Did I sleep talk about food? Or worse, did I say Kitty's name? Either way, this trip had just entered psychological thriller territory. And I still hadn't met my online girlfriend in person. At least, not knowingly. I don't know what was more unsettling, waking up in a luxury suite paid for by my nightmare of a boss, or being served my favorite breakfast dishes by said nightmare without any explanation, as if she'd been studying my eating habits for months, maybe years, maybe through a burner account on a dating app, because nothing made sense anymore, especially not Emily Carter saying, breakfast is important, while gently pushing a tray of mango sticky rice and pickled cabbage fish toward me like some doting wife out of a sitcom, except this sitcom was produced by a deranged algorithm trying to gaslight me into thinking my tyrant boss was secretly my dream girl, and I'd already married her in my heart online under the alias, Kitty, who may or may not be the same woman now sipping her coffee across the suite's dining table without batting an eye. And don't even get me started on how she said I talk in my sleep, because now I was wondering what else I might have blabbed while passed out, like, Kitty, send more thigh pics, or worse, I love you, which, if true, meant the iceberg in front of me had front row tickets to all my delusional fantasies, and now I couldn't even look at her without turning red and internally combusting from embarrassment while she sat there, elegantly chewing like nothing was weird, even though the entire world had shifted under my feet. And as if that wasn't enough, when we got back from the meetings that afternoon, I went straight to the front desk to confirm I'd be moved to a separate room now that availability had cleared up, only for the receptionist to blink in confusion and say, actually, MS. Carter told us there's no need to reassign Mr. Walker. She specifically approved the arrangement for the remainder of your stay, and if that wasn't the moment my brain short-circuited and rebooted itself into pure panic mode, I don't know what was, because what kind of boss arranges to share a suite with her subordinate unless she's planning either a company scandal or an elaborate HR trap? And either way I wanted out, but when I asked her about it directly, she looked genuinely puzzled and slightly offended and said, do you not like living here? With this quiet little frown like I'd just insulted her cooking, which again, why was she even cooking for me? She's the CEO, for God's sake. And I scrambled to recover, saying, of course not, I just don't want to disturb your rest or make you uncomfortable, to which she blinked, paused, then muttered, you were very clear about that yesterday. And I suddenly realized she was referencing the exact look of horror I must have given her when I first learned we'd be rooming together, which meant she had noticed and maybe even felt bad about it, which was weirdly considerate for someone who once made an intern cry during a quarterly review just for misspelling logistics on a chart, and now here she was, looking vaguely guilty and telling me in a soft voice, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I won't do it again. And I stood there speechless, because this version of Emily, this weirdly human, kind of awkward, slightly flustered Emily, was so far removed from the cold-blooded boss I knew that I honestly didn't know what to say or think anymore, except that I was either hallucinating or I was deeply screwed, and neither option sounded particularly great right now. And later that night, Kitty finally texted back after hours of radio silence, saying, honey, maybe your boss isn't all that bad. Maybe she just doesn't know how to show she cares. And I stared at the message like it had personally betrayed me, because what kind of online girlfriend suddenly starts defending the villain in your life? And I texted her back, okay, what's going on? Are you feeling sorry for Emily Carter now? Are you switching sides? And she replied, no, I'm just saying it's possible she's misunderstood, you know. Maybe she's a little lonely. I mean, no one ever talks about her personal life, right? Doesn't that make you wonder? And yeah, it did make me wonder, especially since I'd never seen Emily with a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a pet, or even a hobby unless crushing souls in executive meetings counted as one, and the next day when I showed up at the hotel buffet hoping to grab a quick bite and escape the awkward breakfast table situation, I found another hand-delivered tray waiting for me in the suite with a note. No buffet today, your favorite items weren't on the menu. And at this point I was getting concerned because now she was handwriting notes and tracking the hotel buffet rotation like my mom did when I was sick in college, and if that wasn't love language behavior, I didn't know what was, except it couldn't be, right, because this was Emily, the same woman who once made me revise a report 13 times in a single day because she didn't like the font spacing. And yet every meal she sent over from breakfast to dessert was perfectly tailored to my taste. To the point that even my coworkers started noticing and whispering things like, "Yo, Director Walker, are you, like, low-key dating the boss or what?" To which I just laughed with the dead eyes of a man being slowly swallowed by confusion and existential dread, and when I told Kitty about it during a video call that night, she cooed, "Baby, maybe she's just secretly sweet, maybe she has a crush on you," and I deadpanned, "Kitty, this woman once threatened to fire me over a typo. If this is her flirting, I'd hate to see her version of affection," and Kitty just laughed, this warm, melodic sound that I'd memorized at this point because she always did it right before saying something that either melted my heart or set off alarm bells in my brain, and sure enough, she said, "I think you're being too hard on her, she's probably misunderstood, and you know, if I were her, I'd probably act all strict too just to hide how much I liked someone, and okay, I'm not a genius but even." I could feel the subtext in that line like a slap in the face with a velvet glove, and then she went quiet and whispered, "Babe, what would you do if, hypothetically, your online girlfriend turned out to be someone you already knew in real life?" And I froze, my stomach twisting, because this wasn't hypothetical anymore, this was dangerously specific, and I typed, "Kitty, you're not about to tell me you're Emily Carter, are you?" And she replied, "No, OMG, no what?" Followed by like 8 stickers of screaming cats, and I laughed nervously, trying to convince myself that it really was a ridiculous idea, but deep down I was already connecting dots I didn't want to connect, already cataloging the tone of voice, the way they both said, "honey," when trying to calm me down, the strange familiarity in their phrasing, the exact favorite foods that only Kitty should know, and it was all too much. So I closed the chat, turned off my phone, and tried to sleep. Except I couldn't, because now I had a new fear to add to the list. What if Emily had known from the beginning? What if she'd figured out I was James the gym guy from the dating app weeks ago and had just been silently watching me embarrass myself in the office, texting her sweet nothings at night and roasting her leadership style by day? And if that was true, I was doomed career-wise, romantically, emotionally, because not only had I insulted my boss behind her back to her face, I'd also basically sexed her with zero filter, and the idea that she'd been reading those messages with a straight face made me want to dig a hole through the earth's crust and disappear into the molten core forever. And yet if Kitty really was Emily, what the hell did that mean about our relationship, about the last 2 years of emotional intimacy, comfort, joy, those nights she stayed up sending me heart emojis while I ranted about deadlines, those soft sleepy voice notes that kept me sane after 12-hour days, those pictures, oh God, the pictures, because if that really was her, then I'd already seen more of my boss than HR would ever allow, and my brain just couldn't take it anymore. So I told myself I'd figure it out tomorrow, I'd confront the possibility head-on, just not tonight, because tonight I needed to survive the rising storm in my head and pray that by morning I hadn't accidentally called her, Kitty, out loud in my sleep again. I should have known from the moment she asked me what I'd do if my sweet online girlfriend turned out to be someone I already knew that things were about to go completely off the rails. But denial is a powerful drug, and I clung to it like a lifeline, even when every red flag in the universe had already slapped me across the face and whispered, "Bro, it's her," in slow motion. And yet I still held on because the idea that Emily Carter, the most terrifying woman in a 10-mile radius, was secretly the clingy, soft-voiced Kitty I'd spent 2 years emotionally spooning with through a screen was just too much for my brain to process without short-circuiting and melting down into a puddle of hot shame and unresolved feelings, and honestly I would have kept dodging the truth if not for what happened that night at the suite, because I woke up in the middle of the night with a dry mouth and went out to grab some water, tiptoeing through the dark like a criminal in my own life, only to walk into the living room and freeze as I saw Emily sitting on the couch again, this time still in that same navy lace nightgown that now felt cursed, scrolling through her phone with a weirdly intense look on her face like she was waiting for something or someone, and as the light hit her skin and reflected off her expression, I noticed something even weirder, the way her brows furrowed when she stared at her screen. The same way Kitty used to when she was sulking about me taking too long to reply, and then she looked up and saw me, and for a second I thought I saw her flinch, not because she was startled but because she looked guilty, like she'd just been caught sneaking candy at 2 a.m., and her eyes dropped to my hand, the one with the band-aid on my finger from opening Kitty's care package the other night, and her expression went from confused to soft to absolutely wrecked in like 3 seconds flat, like she'd seen a ghost. And it hit me like a freight train. This was the look, the one Kitty always gave me through the screen when I was down, the look that said, I see you, I love you, please don't shut me out, and in that moment, the final piece clicked, the voice, the breakfast, the behavior, the guilt, the way she defended Emily as if they were the same person because they were, and I knew it, I just didn't want to believe it, and so I stood there, staring at her, whispering, you, and she blinked, wide-eyed, and didn't say anything, just clutched her phone tighter, like it could protect her from the fallout she knew was coming, and I couldn't take it, I needed space, so I turned and went back to my room like a coward, like a man whose world had just been flipped inside out by the softest husband he'd ever heard come from the mouth of his worst enemy, except now she wasn't even that anymore, was she? Because the devil boss and the clingy kitten were the same damn person, and I didn't know whether to scream or cry or just lie on the floor until the existential dread passed, but instead I grabbed my phone and texted her, not Emily, Kitty, because I didn't know who else to talk to even though they were the same person, and that was the most insane part of all, and I typed, I think I found out your secret, and a second later, the phone in the living room lit up and buzzed and I heard her inhale sharply, and that was it, the confirmation I didn't want but needed, and I felt everything and nothing at the same time, betrayal, confusion, affection, awe, humiliation, rage, all of it like a Category 5 hurricane in my chest. And the worst part wasn't even the lie, it was knowing she'd been with me this whole time, through the worst days, the loneliest nights, and I never saw it, never even suspected that the one person I thought I could be real with was already in my life, watching me trip over myself in meetings, listening to me badmouth her over text, hearing me complain about her coldness without ever saying a word, and that kind of patience is terrifying. That kind of restraint means she could have ended me at any moment but chose not to, which meant she really cared, which made it worse somehow, because now I didn't know if I was angry at her or myself, and as I sat on the bed spiraling, she knocked on my door, soft, barely audible, and said, James, can we talk? And I said nothing, just stared at the door, and then she said, please. And her voice cracked in a way that Kitty's did when she was scared I'd block her or stop replying, and that wrecked me all over again, because now that I heard it in person, I knew without a doubt it was her, same rhythm, same pitch, same everything, and I opened the door and there she was, standing like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar, eyes red, hair messy, no makeup, just Emily, not the CEO, not the boss, not the cold face of the company, but the girl who used to text me about missing me and wanting hugs and thigh pics and cuddles, and I just stared at her, heart pounding, and she whispered, I'm sorry, and I didn't say anything, just kept looking at her because what do you say to that, to someone who pretended to be a stranger so they could be close to you, and she stepped closer and said, I didn't mean to deceive you, I swear, when I realized it was you, I panicked, and I didn't know how to tell you, and then you said if your online girlfriend turned out to be me, you'd vanish into the woods, and I got scared. I thought I'd lose you, so I didn't say anything, and then I saw you struggling at work and I just wanted to take care of you, even if I couldn't say it directly, so I made breakfast, I fought to keep you on the project, and she choked up, tears spilling, voice trembling, I just didn't want you to hate me, not after everything we shared, and I finally found my voice and muttered, so you knew this whole time, and she nodded, biting her lip, since Chicago. That first night. I saw your hand, the band-aid, and I remembered the video call, and I knew, and I laughed, sharp and bitter, and you just let me keep embarrassing myself, and she looked horrified, no. Never. You were never embarrassing, I was just scared. I didn't know how to fix it. I wanted to come clean but I was afraid you'd leave, and I thought maybe if I gave it time, you'd see me, really see me, not just as your boss, but ASME, and her voice cracked again and she whispered, please don't block me again. I know I messed up. I won't lie to you again. Just don't leave, and she looked so raw and vulnerable that I forgot how to stay mad, forgot how to breathe, because this wasn't the Emily Carter I knew, this was Kitty, crying in front of me, shaking like she was one rejection away from collapsing, and I stepped forward and pulled her into my arms, felt her grip my shirt like a lifeline, and she sobbed, you're not mad, and I said, I am but I missed you more, and she looked up, eyes wide, lips trembling, and then we kissed, slow and clumsy. And desperate like two people who'd waited too long to admit the truth, and when we finally pulled apart, she whispered, does this mean I passed the probation period? And I laughed, actually laughed, because only she could make a joke at a time like that, and I said, we'll renegotiate the contract later, and she smiled through her tears and said, I love you, and I said it back without hesitation. Because no matter how twisted and complicated this whole thing had been, the truth was that I had already fallen in love with her, both versions of her, and now that the masks were off, I didn't want to run anymore. So apparently dating your cold-blooded CEO after discovering she was also your clingy online girlfriend of 2 years is not as straightforward as you'd think, because the very next morning after the big emotional, I love you, bomb drop, I woke up thinking the world would be sunshine and heart emojis, but instead, I found Emily standing in front of the full-length mirror in the hotel suite, fully dressed in her sharp work outfit like nothing had changed, arms crossed, expression unreadable, and the second she noticed I was awake, she cleared her throat like she was about to fire me again and said, get dressed. We have a meeting in 20 minutes, and all the warmth from last night evaporated like steam from a coffee cup left too long, and I blinked, sitting up, still shirtless, still emotionally fragile, and muttered, good morning to you too, babe, expecting maybe a smile, a blush, a hint of the Kitty I knew, but she just raised one elegant brow and said, punctuality is still expected, regardless of personal developments, and walked out like a boss from a mafia drama, and I just sat there, stunned, wondering if I had dreamed the entire night before or if I had entered a weird dimension where my girlfriend had multiple personalities, because the woman who curled up in my arms crying and saying she loved me was not the same woman who just ice-glared me into brushing my teeth with military speed. And that set the tone for our new normal emotional whiplash and a daily game of decoding which version of Emily I was getting that hour, because by the time we got back to the office, she was all business again, dropping files on my desk like usual, scolding someone in accounting with her usual death stare, and calling me Director Walker like I was just another cog in her corporate machine, and I couldn't even protest because she was technically right, we were still at work, and she had a reputation to maintain, but when we were alone in the elevator, just the two of us, she leaned in suddenly and whispered, you didn't say good morning back, and her lips brushed my earlobe. And I swear I almost short-circuited on the spot, because how do you go from public execution to sensual whisper in 5 seconds flat, and from that point on, the roller coaster didn't stop, because dating Emily Carter meant having lunch delivered to your desk like clockwork with little handwritten notes that said things like, eat before you faint, idiot, followed by a heart and a doodle of a cat that suspiciously looked like Kitty, and then sitting in a meeting with her 2 hours later while she destroyed someone's quarterly forecast and didn't even blink when I gave her a, what the hell, look across the table, and then later that evening, she'd text me from across the office like a high school girl crushing on her TA, saying, dinner at my place tonight. I made your favorite, and who was I to say no to that, so I showed up at her ridiculous mansion estate, only to find her in the kitchen wearing an apron that said, kiss the cook, which she wore with a completely straight face, like this was a normal Tuesday night and she wasn't the same woman who once made an intern quit by sighing too aggressively at their proposal. And as I stood there watching her sauté vegetables with hyperfocus and zero coordination, I realized something deeply terrifying. She was trying, like actually trying to be a good girlfriend, and she was failing in the most adorable way possible, like she'd studied YouTube videos of how to date a normal man and was executing them one awkward gesture at a time, and I couldn't stop watching her, couldn't stop loving her even when the rice was undercooked and the fish was somehow both burned and raw, because this was still Kitty, The woman who sent me thigh pics and called me hubby at 2 a.m., except now she was in front of me in the flesh, pouting because I wasn't finishing the green beans, and when I finally caved and said, "You don't have to cook for me, you know," she crossed her arms and muttered, "But they said food is the fastest way to a man's heart," and I laughed so hard I nearly choked, because I realized she had bookmarked dating advice like a nervous college student, and when I leaned over and kissed her on the forehead and said, "Babe, you already have my heart," she practically melted into a puddle and whispered, "Don't say things like that so casually, I'm still adjusting," and I had to remind myself that this woman, this flustered, red-faced girlfriend trying to figure out how to cut a mango, was the same person who once shut down a $40 million merger in a single email, and that dichotomy was killing me, in the best way possible, and the weirdest part. We still hadn't crossed that line yet, not really, because even though we'd flirted online like crazy and sent each other stuff that could get our phones banned in 5 countries, now that we were face to face, Emily turned into this shy, overly polite girl who blushed if I touched her waist for too long, and every time I leaned in for more than just a kiss, she'd pull away and say, "Not yet," and I respected that, of course I did, but it was hilarious considering how bold she'd been behind the screen, and one night I teased her about it, saying, "You know, for someone who used to beg for photos under the username Kitty, you're really acting like a nervous freshman," and she turned beet red and threw a pillow at me, yelling, "That was before I had to face you afterward," and I laughed and tackled her onto the couch and kissed her until she stopped pouting, and that became our rhythm, testing her limits, her testing my patience, both of us pretending we weren't absolutely obsessed with each other even when it was painfully obvious, and the more time we spent together, the more she softened, not just with me but in general, like the whole office noticed. She smiled more, scolded less, even complimented someone's PowerPoint layout once, which almost gave the design team a heart attack, and people started whispering things like, "Is President Carter dating someone?" and "Has hell frozen over?" And I just kept my head down, trying not to grin like an idiot every time she passed my desk and slipped me a chocolate under the table like we were in middle school and not in the middle of a Fortune 500 company. And outside of work, she started integrating me into her life in subtle but unmistakable ways: extra drawer space at her place, a toothbrush in her bathroom, snacks she never ate but stocked just because I liked them, and I started noticing things in reverse too, like how her favorite mug from the office now sat in my kitchen sink, and how her perfume clung to my pillows, and how her voice sounded more like home than my actual home, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized the 1-month probation she'd jokingly asked for was almost over, and I hadn't even noticed the days flying by because it already felt like she was part of me, like this whole time we were just orbiting each other until the gravity finally pulled us in, and on the last night of that probation month, I came home to find her cooking again, except this time everything smelled edible, even good, and she greeted me with the brightest smile and said, "I think I finally got the hang of it," and I looked at her, apron slightly crooked, hair tied back, and said, "Emily," and she blinked, "Yeah," and I said, "I've been thinking," and her eyes narrowed immediately, "About what?" and I said, "About renewing your contract," and she immediately caught on and lit up, "You mean," and I nodded, "you passed your probation," and she squealed, actually squealed like a teenager, and jumped into my arms, nearly knocking the pot off the stove, and I caught her mid-spin and kissed her hard, because after everything, the hiding, the awkwardness, the lies, the weird breakfasts, the identity crisis, I finally had her, fully and truly, and she was mine, and I was hers, and no NDA, board meeting, or HR policy in the world was gonna stop me from loving her now. Dating Emily Carter was like living 2 parallel lives that somehow collided and folded into one absurd, hilarious, secretly sweet reality, and now that her probation period as my girlfriend had officially passed, she dove into her new role with the same intensity she once reserved for merger negotiations and quarterly audits, except instead of grilling vendors and barking at interns, she was now trying to spoon-feed me soup, write diary entries in cutesy stickers, and bake cookies shaped like tiny cats that tasted more like regret than dessert, but I ate every single one anyway because every crooked cookie, every burnt corner, every hand-scrawled, "Love you, hubby," note in my bento was her way of loving me, and even when she messed up, it was the most beautiful kind of chaos I'd ever experienced. Because the woman who once terrified the entire company now got embarrassed if I kissed her on the neck too suddenly, stammered when I called her baby in public, and texted me at 3 a.m. asking if I thought her thighs were still worthy of leg pics, like we hadn't already crossed every line in the book emotionally and practically lived in each other's phones for 2 years, and somehow the strangest part wasn't that Emily Carter, the she-devil of Carter and Company, was now my girlfriend, it was that she was still writing in that little notebook of hers, the one she tried to hide under the couch one night when I came over early and caught her muttering to herself while writing in it, and of course I snatched it immediately because I'm nosy and reckless and already emotionally invested, and she lunged for it like a horror movie character trying to disarm a bomb, yelling, "Wait, wait, wait and open that," but I was already halfway through the first page, and what I read nearly knocked me flat because it wasn't a diary full of cold calculations or romantic fantasies, it was a raw, vulnerable, brutally honest confession from the Emily no one else saw, the one who built a wall so high around herself that even her parents couldn't climb it, the Emily who had panic attacks in silence and powered through sleepless nights with pills and pride, the Emily who once found my profile on a whim during a breakdown, followed me just to feel something real, and never expected I'd message back, let alone change her life, and there in that notebook were scribbled thoughts like, "I wish I could hug him when he's tired," and "I think I love him, even if he never knows it's me," and my chest cracked open in a way I didn't know it could because in all that time, while I was falling for Kitty, she was falling too harder, deeper, messier because she knew both sides of me while I only knew half of her, and she carried that secret every day like a silent weight, scared I'd hate her if I ever knew, and I just stood there holding the notebook while she sat frozen on the floor like a cat caught mid-theft, waiting for judgment, eyes wide and glassy and pleading like I'd just opened Pandora's box, and I crouched down, wrapped my arms around her, and whispered, "You idiot. You should have told me sooner. I love you more now than ever," and she broke down in my arms, burying her face in my chest like she was trying to disappear, mumbling, "I was so scared, you don't get it, you were the only thing I had that felt safe," and I held her tighter because I did get it, maybe not all of it, but enough to know that this womanly boss, my girlfriend, my secret online wife was worth every confusing twist and every emotional detour it took to get here, and after that night something shifted between us, like the tension melted and we finally settled into something real, something domestic but not boring, familiar but still full of sparks, and our routines blurred into a strange mix of professional efficiency and romantic chaos where we could go from presenting at a corporate summit to arguing about who hogged the blanket in the same day, and I thought I'd get tired of the novelty but I didn't, not even close. Because Emily didn't just love hard, she loved loud, in secret ways and public ones, from slipping motivational notes into my briefcase to waiting outside the office just to walk me home even though she had a driver, and every time I thought she couldn't surprise me, she did, like the day I found my closet slowly filling with her stuff and my stuff slowly migrating to her place, until one day we woke up and realized we hadn't slept apart in weeks, and she said, voice muffled against my shoulder, "I think we live together now." And I just kissed her and said, "Took you long enough to notice," and even then she got flustered, hiding her face in my shirt like some blushing rookie instead of the woman who once made 3 VPs cry in one board meeting, and that contrast never stopped killing Maine the best way because she was still the CEO at work, still terrifying when she wanted to be, still capable of ending a man's career with one cold stare. But now she was also the girl who doodled hearts on post-its and sang to herself while folding laundry, who put up a framed screenshot of our first chat on her desk at home, who once got drunk off half a glass of wine and cried while hugging a stuffed cat because she was so happy she didn't have to hide anymore, and it hit me that for all the power and poise she had, she'd spent so long pretending to be untouchable that being vulnerable was her biggest rebellion, and loving me was her most dangerous act, and I wasn't about to let that go to waste, not now, not ever. So one night, while she was stirring soup in my kitchen, wearing one of my hoodies 2 sizes too big and humming a tune that sounded suspiciously like the jingle from our company's product launch, I walked up, hugged her from behind, and said, "Hey, Emily," and she turned, spoon in hand, eyebrow raised, "Yeah," and I pulled out a ring, dead serious, heart racing, "Marry me," and she blinked once, twice, dropped the spoon straight into the pot, splashing soup everywhere, then whispered, "You're not kidding." And I shook my head, dead serious. No more hiding, no more aliases. Just us. Always, And she burst into tears before she could even say yes, nodded 1,000 times, clung to me like I was oxygen, and then kissed me so hard I forgot how to stand, and just like that, the girl I'd loved through a screen, through corporate hierarchy, through every weird coincidence and emotional mess, became mine for real, no filters, no secrets, no distance, and somewhere in the back of my mind, the voice of old me whispered, "Guess Kitty really was the one," and for once, I couldn't agree more.